limited plan. They was talking about this. I forgot who, maybe Nick Wright, but he said Caitlin Clark is like the biggest superstar under the age of 35, like especially in the basketball world. And I was just like, that's kind of crazy. But
he said all athletes, right?
He said basketball, basically.
Oh,
he was saying Americans under 35 as well.
American hoopers under 35.
Them are tough.
I don't know, bro. I think so.
Yeah, she might be the biggest. I don't know if she's more famous. Is she more famous than Jayson Tatum?
Yeah.
Jeff Teague just sat down on a podcast and said something that has the entire basketball world in a full-blown debate. He compared Caitlin Clark's fame directly to Jayson Tatum and Anthony Edwards, and the conclusion he reached has NBA fans feeling all kinds of ways. Nobody saw this conversation going in that direction. Now the internet is on fire, and everyone's asking the same question. Is Caitlin Clark really more famous right now than two of the NBA's biggest superstars? Or is that a massive stretch? Drop a comment below. Where do you stand? But before we dive into the debate, let's set the scene, because the moment that sparked this conversation is just as wild as the argument itself.
She's not more famous than
I think if people would have called and told them that Jayson Tatum is at the Pike High School game, I think people would have pulled up. People called and said Caitlin Clark is at Pike High School, and niggas was like, oh, okay.
It was regular season.
Yeah.
I just feel like respect to her. Like, she, in her sport, she's so massive in her sport. I can see that. But I don't see her being bigger than these NBA players, bro.
Yeah.
I don't think she's bigger than Ant.
She famous as hell, though.
She's famous as shit.
She's super famous.
Jeff Teague, former NBA point guard, 11 years in the league, is a man who's been around professional basketball long enough to truly understand what real fame and true star power look like up close. So when he sat down on a podcast and the topic of Caitlin Clark's celebrity came up, nobody expected what followed. Because the discussion quickly turned into one of those rare, honest, unscripted sports conversations, the kind where people say what they actually believe, not just what they're supposed to say. It all started with a bold claim that had been circulating through sports media for weeks. Caitlin Clark is the biggest basketball superstar under the age of 35 in the United States right now. Not just in women's basketball. Not just in the WNBA. In basketball. Period. Among all American players under 35. And that is a massive statement. Naturally, the reaction at the table was exactly what you'd expect from a group of former NBA players: immediate skepticism, followed by a surprisingly deep and thoughtful debate. A conversation that kept circling back to conclusions nobody was completely comfortable with, but nobody could fully dismiss either.
It's crazy, like, after Bron leaves, who's gonna be the next, real star in the NBA?
Nigga don't know. Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, I'm nothing.
He bigger than Caitlin Clark, you think?
Yeah, what?
What? Fuck yeah.
Caitlin Clark is big in the States. Wemby big everywhere.
International?
Yeah.
Like, he's an international superstar.
The first name that immediately came up as a counterargument was Victor Wembanyama. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. Right now, he's a legitimate answer to almost any question about basketball stardom. A true generational talent in the purest meaning of the phrase. At 7'3", with elite skill, defensive dominance, and unreal offensive creativity, he represents a combination the sport has simply never seen packaged into one player before. His ceiling? Completely unknown. There is no real historical comparison that fully applies. He is his own category. But here's the wrinkle. Wembanyama is French. He's a global superstar, with recognition, reach, and fan investment that stretches across Europe and the entire basketball world in ways most American-born players simply can't match internationally. And once the conversation shifted specifically to American basketball stars under 35, Wembanyama exited the debate by definition. Not because his fame isn't real, it absolutely is. But because it operates on a completely different geographic and cultural axis. So now, the question narrowed. Among American basketball players under 35, who is actually more famous than Caitlin Clark? And that's when the table went quiet. Because suddenly, the answers weren't so easy. That hesitation, that struggle to name someone definitively, is the story. Jayson Tatum came up immediately, and that made complete sense. Tatum is a four-time All-Star. The face of the Boston Celtics, one of the most storied franchises in the history of professional basketball. An NBA Finals appearance. multiple seasons as one of the league's elite players. Just 26 years old. By every traditional basketball metric, Jayson Tatum is a full-blown superstar. And yet, Jeff Teague essentially said something that made the room shift. That Caitlin Clark might actually be more famous than him. Respectfully. And that word, respectfully, was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Because Teague wasn't saying Clark is a better basketball player. He wasn't saying she could outplay him. He wasn't even making it about basketball skill at all. He was talking about name recognition, cultural reach, mainstream visibility. And then he gave a simple example. If you announce that Jayson Tatum is going to show up at a high school basketball game, people will come. But if you announce that Caitlin Clark is going to that same game, the reaction would be on a completely different level. And that isn't a slight against Tatum. It's an honest reflection of the kind of fame Clark has built.
The shit.
She's super famous.
She is, bro.
And that impact, like you said, is crazy, bro. When you damn near
You
divide
got
the league.
on some real shit. It's damn near second glance. Like, oh shit, that is Caitlin Clark.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you.
I mean, that's a couple. That's everybody though.
Oh, nigga, and Edwards walking the motherfucker. Shay walks somewhere, that's Shay. Jayson Tatum walking somewhere, nigga, that's Jayson Tatum.
But you get if you
because
see
they
Caitlin
big.
Clark, if you see Caitlin Clark, that's Caitlin Clark. She just no offense, but
she dressed down, bro.
She's not a tall girl, so
I
it's
sat
like
next to her at Del Frisco's for like 45 minutes. Was like, oh shit, this Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying on the second
'Cause she's
glance
not a
when you
big
looking
woman.
at
That's
it.
what I'm saying. Like, I think that's the point, though. Like,
Yeah.
But when you
easily
recognize her,
recognizable. Like, oh shit, like it's Caitlin Clark after you recognize.
Yeah, she famous for the bitch.
The kind that crosses demographics, crosses age groups, crosses communities that normally never overlap in their sports consumption. Tatum's fame is deep inside NBA culture. Clark's fame is wide. It reaches people who have never watched a WNBA game. People who may have never watched basketball at all until she arrived. Then came the Anthony Edwards comparison. And this one caused even more pushback around the table, which tells you just how heavy this conversation had become. Because Edwards is arguably the most exciting young player in the NBA right now. His personality is magnetic. His highlights are electric. His energy turns basketball clips into viral entertainment. Even people who don't follow the sport know who he is. And yet, the consensus that slowly formed around the table was that Caitlin Clark is probably more famous than Anthony Edwards right now. Even if it felt uncomfortable to say out loud in a room full of NBA people. Not because Edwards lacks star power, he absolutely doesn't. But because Clark's current cultural moment has created a level of mainstream recognition that still sits slightly ahead of where Edwards is outside hardcore basketball circles. And that realization? That's when the conversation truly changed.
I don't know who the fuck is that.
Yeah. Like, if Caitlin Clark, respectfully, walk in with the people that work with us with the volume, you gonna have to look around and realize, like,
Her and Audrey damn near the same.
You saying her walking in? Shout out to gang, man.
no, for real. Shout out to our people, we love them. But she
Shout out to
walk in,
Audrey,
she
bro.
walk in with
behind the
Jamie
bitch
and
at
them.
Pike. I didn't even recognize
I
her.
sat behind her at the game.
I didn't recognize her. I didn't know it was her until she was at the door.
Yeah.
And like we was about to go on overtime, she was at the door, and somebody was like, "Caitlin Clark right there." I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
man.
to say she's the biggest basketball player in the world, that's a little tough.
Yeah, she's pretty fucking famous, though.
she's famous."
No,
Her
she
name,
is.
Her name is.
Her name is
name.
bigger than her.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fact. Her name, her way.
I think her name probably hold more weight than a lot of people that seeing them in person is different. But like,
Yeah.
if you say Caitlin Clark is going to be at this venue,
Yeah, her name
Oh, yeah,
is
yeah.
on-
That's
The
different.
specific language used around the table was revealing. They kept saying things like, "She famous as hell," and "Her name holds weight," and then the phrase that stood out the most. "Her name is bigger than her." That line is especially powerful because it captures something very real about how Caitlin Clark's fame actually works. When you announce that Caitlin Clark is going to be somewhere, when her name is attached to an event before it even happens, the reaction is massive. The Gatorade bottle that sold out in 20 seconds and crashed the website. The Nike shoe launch that insiders agree is going to be the biggest drop of the year. The announcement of her NBC analyst appearance that generated more conversation than most actual game results. These are all name-driven moments. The announcement alone creates action before Clark ever steps into the building. And that is a very specific kind of fame. It's the difference between being a star that people recognize and being a star whose name alone creates movement. Teague and the table were identifying that Clark sits firmly in the second category and noting, with some surprise, that the NBA players they were comparing her to might not sit there quite as comfortably as their resumes suggest. The conversation around in-person recognition was just as fascinating and unusually honest. One person said they sat behind Clark for 45 minutes before realizing it was her. Another said they didn't recognize her until someone pointed her out near the door. And the observation that followed was genuinely insightful. Clark's physical presence doesn't announce itself the way an NBA player's does. Jayson Tatum is 6 feet 10 inches. When he walks into a room, the room feels it before anyone processes who he is. That physical dominance is its own form of recognition. Clark doesn't have that. She blends in. She looks regular, low-key, unassuming, until the moment of recognition hits. And then the reaction is instant and explosive. That dynamic, ordinary until recognized, then overwhelmingly recognized, describes a very specific type of celebrity. Taylor Swift operates the same way. And that's why her name is bigger than her is such a perfect summary. Now, the shoe conversation near the end of the discussion tied everything together. Because sneaker drops are one of the cleanest metrics we have for measuring athlete fame. They convert cultural interest into instant consumer action. And the table agreed almost unanimously. When Caitlin Clark's signature Nike shoe drops, it's going to be chaos. The first batch will be nearly impossible to get. The comparison made was to Aya Wilson's first signature release, which was already extremely hard to obtain. And Clark's mainstream reach is significantly larger. If Wilson's launch was difficult, Clark's will be a frenzy. And here's the wild part. That chaos is coming while the WNBA season is uncertain, while the CBA situation is unresolved, and while Clark hasn't even played a professional game in months. The response will be driven entirely by name alone, which is exactly what Teague and the table were describing. And there's something even bigger happening here. The fact that this conversation is happening at all on a mainstream basketball podcast led by NBA lifers is itself a data point. 2 years ago, this conversation probably never happens. 1 year ago, it maybe happens, but with far more resistance. Now, you've got NBA veterans saying, she might be more famous than Tatum. She might be bigger than Ant. She famous as hell. And they're saying it seriously. These aren't Clark superfans. They're NBA lifers. People whose entire careers are built around the NBA being the pinnacle of basketball. They didn't walk into that discussion expecting to conclude that a WNBA player might be the most famous American basketball star under 35. They arrived there through examples, through evidence, through honest reasoning. And the fact that the conclusion made some of them visibly uncomfortable? That's exactly what real conclusions look like when they challenge long-held assumptions. Jeff Teague summed it up perfectly. She might be the biggest. That might be isn't hedging. It's genuine uncertainty about a question that would have sounded ridiculous just 2 years ago and now demands serious consideration. Jayson Tatum and Anthony Edwards are elite players. They'll compete for MVPs and championships for the next decade. Their basketball legacies will be massive. But right now, February 2026, if you announce Caitlin Clark is showing up somewhere, the response suggests Teague might be right. And the people who spent years dismissing her impact? They're now watching a former NBA All-Star confirm what the numbers have been screaming. She is that famous. And the shoe hasn't even dropped yet. Jeff Teague said what much of the basketball world is finally being forced to accept. Caitlin Clark's fame now operates at a level where comparisons to NBA superstars are no longer controversial, they're necessary. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your take in the comments. I'll see you next time.